All right. So again, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Stakeholder Group of Persons with Disabilities side event in the context of the HLPF 2021. It is indeed a pleasure on behalf of the Stakeholder Group of Persons with Disabilities that you are with us today. We really hope you enjoy what we have prepared for you. Before we actually begin with the side event, I will invite my colleague Bethany Brown to share with us some housekeeping announcements. Bethany, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Jose. I would like to highlight that closed captions are available in the link in the chat box, and simultaneous interpretation is available in Spanish. This can be selected at the bottom of the screen by clicking the globe icon. Throughout this event, please enter any questions for panelists into the chat whenever they come to your mind, and we will compile them for the question and answer time. Lastly, we would note that this event is being recorded. And with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Jose.
Thank you, Bethany. We always like to highlight the need for accessibility when it comes to all type of events, but even more important for these type of virtual gatherings, where we know that many participants, usually people with disabilities, experience difficulties in accessing the webinar. So we have done our best to ensure that this webinar is fully accessible. Please do let us know if there is anything else that we can do. And we really hope that other side events in the context of the HLPF, as well as official sessions, also consider accessibility as a top priority and actually leaving no one behind. The first thing to do, not to leave people behind, is actually to offer the highest standards of accessibility for everyone. So said that, welcome to our side event again. We have a great list of speakers, so I will not take long before before inviting speakers to share with you their presentations. But just for those who have recently became part of the HLPF or getting to know the stakeholder group of persons with disabilities, our group is made of different organizations representing the voices of people with disabilities around the world. And basically, what we try to do here is to ensure that during the HLPF sessions, and in particular, the HLPF negotiations, people with disabilities are represented. Not only because we have a huge number of people with disabilities around the world, but even more important because people with disabilities and their representative organizations have played a key role in the Agenda 2030, and we try to keep that momentum as much as we can alive when it comes to including issues related to people with disabilities and the Agenda 2030. And this side event is actually a combination of, I would say, two elements. One is a little bit of a reflection of where we are at in terms of the implementation of the Agenda 2030. And that's why we would hear from people working in the field, working at the national level, but at the same time, looking into the future. If there is something that I think we all can agree on, is that the future is somehow uncertain. And in order to predict and plan our future, we need to know where we are at, but also what we want to achieve in the next couple of years. And actually, this side event has this objective as well, to see how we can strengthen our work, both national and internationally, to advance the implementation of the Agenda 2030. So with no further ado, let me introduce our first speaker, Mr. Mohammed Lautfi. Mohammed is the co-chair of the Stakeholder Group of Persons with Disabilities, the interim executive director for Disabled People International, a senior advisor on accessibility for G3ICT, and above all, Mohammed has been actively involved in many HLPF. So we have requested him to share with us some reflections about how we can be more effective in our partnerships, what we have to look into the future if we want to even make the HLPFs more productive and more participatory for different stakeholders. Mohammed, welcome. Thank you for your time, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Jose. Good morning, everyone. It's so nice to meet again during HLPF, like every year we do. I'm sure there are new people who are joining us for the first time. So welcome aboard, and we are looking forward to engaging you with lots of advocacy work to ensure that our voices as persons with disabilities are heard by the stakeholder, by the state, by the country members of the United Nations regarding sustainable development goals and its framework. So I represent Disabled Peoples International, where for many years I have worked with advocates across disabilities and around the world. I am a proud global leader within the Stakeholder Group of Persons with Disabilities. The disability movement would not be where we are today without partnerships, so that before the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, the world viewed us only by our individual disabilities. But we made common cause with one another to push for recognition of our common human rights, our common humanity. We partnered with governments to shape the convention under the banner of nothing about us without us. Adding to this, the 2030 agenda also transformed the traditional vision of partnership and highlights the significant role of stakeholders, including persons with disabilities and their representative organizations. I would like to center my remarks today on the language of the CRPD that supports an environment of partnership, and then share some good practice examples. Article 32 of the CRPD on international cooperation recognizes the importance of partnership between states, parties, and civil society, in particular organizations of persons with disabilities. It calls for states to ensure that international cooperation, including international development programs, are inclusive of and accessible to persons with disabilities. This is really an important background for the conversation we are having today. It is our human right to partner with states parties on international cooperation. Here in this HLPF space, where the world comes together to discuss sustainable development, organizations of persons with disabilities have a unique opportunity that we seize it together. We work closely with other organizations of persons with disabilities and allies, including CBM Global Disability Inclusion of the International Disability and Development consortium to create a space where persons with disabilities can meaningfully engage. This does not just take place over the course of these 2 weeks of HLPF, but rather on the long-term level, such as, for example, this year we have offered webinars on regional engagement mechanism and involvement, inclusive disability data, COVID-19 response, and specific SDG discussions with experts. A key aspect of partnership is ensuring that representative organizations of persons with disabilities have a leading role at the table in all phases of SDG-related initiatives and others. Since persons with disabilities and their representative organizations are the experts on their issues, and especially those that are affecting their lives. In fact, during the pandemic, our stakeholder group of persons with disabilities, COVID-19 research indicated that many organizations of persons with disabilities stepped in and took over responsibilities for their members and constituency in areas where their governments lacked support and where vital gaps existed. Many organizations of persons with disabilities became sources of vital information, raised awareness with their members, and provided accessible material in different format on COVID-19. Moreover, many countries, governments, in many countries, governments began to provide national sign language interpretation and live captioning for COVID-19 news briefings as a direct result of advocacy efforts led by the deaf community and organizations of persons with disabilities, and sometimes with the support of international organizations. In closing, I call on you to involve persons with disabilities and their representative organizations in planning, implementation, monitoring and evaluation of the CRPD SDGs and in COVID-19 response and recovery efforts. Furthermore, I invite you to join the CRPD forum listserv. A listserv is a link is being dropped in the chat box to make sure you are kept up to date on the latest opportunities to engage. In the end, we can only and truly achieve inclusive, sustainable development goals for all if we work together in partnership with one another. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mohammed. For those who have questions for Mohammed, please, you can write them in the chat box. We encourage participants to write the questions in the chat box, not only because that facilitates a lot the Q&A session, but also for some of our speakers, reasonable accommodations. It's easier for many of us to actually be able to access the questions in advance. So if you have questions, please do type them in the chat box. Let me now introduce our second speaker. In line with the first element I was mentioning before, this webinar aims at addressing, which is where we are at. What can we do? What we have been doing so far in order to achieve the SDGs. So from Argentina, We have our colleague Dominic Cantor from Fundación Visibilia, perdón. And Dominic has been working for Visibilia for many years in different capacities. She has been working in converting documents into easy to read format. She has been presenting in different international events like the Global Disability Summit held in Argentina in 2019. She has also been involved in other organizations of persons with intellectual disabilities in Argentina, ASDRA, and also represented her community in different projects on the international level, some of them related to the International Labour Organization and some other exciting initiatives. So Dominic, welcome, bienvenida, and the floor is yours.
Bueno, buenos días, mi nombre es Dominicanto y soy de Argentina. Agradezco.
Good morning. My name is Dominic Canto, and I thank you all the opportunity. It is a great honor to be here. The COVID crisis shook the world. It brought out the worst and the best in people. The most vulnerable ones were the most vulnerable, but we, the resilient ones, we were more resilient, and we taught resilience to everyone else. And our example is a great example because we always face complex situations. I have a disability, and it is also an intellectual disability, and I am also a woman. Other people may also have an intellectual disability, and they may be refugees, or they may be persecuted for their race or for their religion. All these complex situations got worse with COVID. Let's tell the truth, even if it hurts. The world in crisis discarded us. We had to start over, explaining the most basic things of all, that above all, we are human beings. With the project Listen, Include, and Respect of international inclusion and Down Syndrome International, we saw that the main barriers are communication and social barriers, and that the main causes of these barriers are discrimination and lack of accessibility. Many times, the barriers are people who do not know what intellectual disability is or don't know how to support as well. We need more time to understand, to think and decide. People sometimes speak too fast, or they want things to be done very quickly. Other times, barriers are hard to overcome because the countries do not have the support to give or they lack money. We need to ensure that the laws that exist seriously protect human rights of people with intellectual disabilities. First of all, we are people. In Latin America, due to the COVID pandemic, it came out from our international report on inclusion that we, people with intellectual disabilities, remained with no assistance, no schools, no place to live, and we remained without jobs. We had to ask for food. In some places, we had to endure more violence. and without fundamental supports. Are we second-class people? Everything without respect. So everything was without fundamental support. Are we second-class people? Are the sustainable development goals only for certain people? Then what what does goal 10 mean to reduce equality? We had to beg the governments so that they could understand that we are people in risk and to give us the vaccine. So the goal 3, health, is just for some of the people. We had to beg them to understand, to support the teachers and to give them online support. Is the goal 4, education only for some people? We keep begging to go back to work with the new normality. Is the goal 8, work, just for some people? The COVID crisis made it clear that words and deeds are very different things. And in order to solve the problems of everyone, it is not useful to seek solutions only for some certain people. So is it only, so are these goals only for certain people? We, the first people with disabilities, we people with disabilities started to show our ability to be leaders because with our example, we have taught ourselves not to lower our arms, not to paralyze with fear, to be creative, to move on, and always giving thanks to life and showing the most important thing that unites us, humanity. We have to think together of solutions for all people. We also have the right to build a better place because we don't live in another world. We also live on the same earth. And so don't leave us out. Nothing of us, nothing about us without us. Thanks a lot. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dominic. Thanks for your great presentation, but even more important, for the questions that you have shared with the audience. I was saying before your presentation that that participant can ask questions to the speakers, but you have challenged all of us by asking questions to us. I hope we can have some of the answers to your great questions. Thank you, Dominic. Again, we are pleased to receive questions for Dominic and Mohammed. Please do write them in the chat box, and we will take them after all the presentations. So now let me move to our next speaker. She's from the European Union of the Deaf. Her name is Martina Bolsch-Nates, and I'm sure I'm mispronouncing your last name again, Martina, and my apologies for that. Although I tried hard, but I never managed to do it right. And Martina has been involved extensively working at the regional level, because you know that if there is something that brings added value to the HLPF every year in New York is the work that happens at the regional level. All these regional forums that take place prior to the HLPF in July are not only a great opportunities for advocacy, but actually to make those connections between the international and the national levels. So we have invited Martina to share with us some of her reflections around the work that she has been doing towards the implementation of the Agenda 2030 at the regional level. But at the same time, what are some of the key messages that she would like to share from the European perspective and representing a regional union of people of deaf people. So Martina, welcomes and welcome, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Jose, and hello, everyone. Thank you for your kind invitation to present. I am Martina. I work as a policy officer at the European Union of the Deaf, and also I'm co-chairing the Constituency of Persons with Disabilities of the Regional Civil Society Engagement Mechanism at the Regional Forum of Sustainable Development in Europe. Today, I will present our work during the regional forum in Europe, and I will also explain our experiences when practically building a more inclusive and effective path for civil society engagement on the regional Europe, on the regional level. So just a little bit of background information. Regional Forum on Sustainable Development in Europe is hosted by the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe. During the forum, we have roundtables, pre-meetings, side events, plenary sessions, all discussing topics surrounded by SDGs. However, the forum is not fully accessible for persons with disabilities. And we did a lot of work throughout the years to ensure that the forum is more inclusive and more accessible for persons with disabilities that aim at engaging in discussions around SDGs. So the civil society during the Regional Forum of Sustainable Development is monitored by the Regional Civil Society Engagement Mechanism. The Regional Civil Society Engagement Mechanism has a number of constituency groups, and one of the groups is the Constituency of Persons with Disabilities, and this is the constituency that we work at. The Regional Civil Society Engagement Mechanism has a number of other constituencies as well, such as Constituency for Women, for Children and Youth, for Indigenous Peoples, LGBTI, elder persons, a lot of different constituencies. So our constituency for persons with disabilities consists of our organization, European Union of the Deaf, is also the European Disability Forum, and every year we try to disseminate the invitations through our networks for smaller organizations to join us and join our constituency, and every year we have other organizations joining our work, which I have to mention is completely voluntarily. We as a constituency have two priorities. We aim at making the forum itself more accessible and inclusive for persons with disabilities. And also we want to ensure that the perspectives of persons with disabilities are meaningfully reflected in the outcome documents of regional forums, which later feed into the high-level political forum. So as a constituency, we take upon an active role from the beginning, which means we start participating through our regional civil society engagement mechanism much earlier, before the start of the forum. We are active players in weekly meetings. We participate in working groups. We try to get involved as many organizations and their voices as possible. We always try to highlight and bring our perspectives to the light, and we really take an active role within the civil society engagement mechanism, because as I mentioned, it has a number of different constituency groups, and to get your perspective noticed and included, it's actually quite difficult. So remaining active prior to the forum is very important for us. Also, we take an active role to advocate for more and better accessibility, because through the years we struggled ensuring international sign interpretation in the forum for deaf participants. And of course, we struggled when advocating for accessibility in all of its senses. So this year we took upon some concrete actions with United Nations Economic Commission for Europe. We highlighted specifically that accessibility is an obligation, it is not a choice. And we used United Nations Disability Inclusion Strategy as a basis of our argument for more accessibility. We showed the need for accessibility. We promoted the forum among our members, encouraged them to register. We showed the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe that people with disabilities are interested and they need to be involved, and the accessibility must be ensured. And of course, when we did not receive some responses in the beginning, we started being creative, and we designed some advocacy strategies to ensure that our arguments are visible. We were thinking of, in case of not having the interpreter, we were still thinking of appointing a deaf presenter without an interpreter. However, in the end, the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe and the Regional Forum provided international sign interpretation because they saw the need for it. They heard our demands, and in the end, the forum was made more accessible for deaf participants. We also, so this was one of the biggest achievements that we had. Also, as I mentioned, we still managed to appoint within the regional forum civil society engagement mechanism, we managed to have a person with a disability as the main presenter on behalf of the Civil Society of Europe. And that was a huge achievement as well, because once again, sign language more visible. The need for interpretation was also highlighted more visibly across the forum. And also, as every year, the outcome document of the regional forum in Europe does include very important and relevant references regarding the UN Crpd accessibility inclusion of persons with disabilities. So this was our experience this year. I have to say we have great achievements, but I also prepared some tips for the future to close my presentation. And I think that we need to continue advocating, use this momentum and continue advocating for more and better accessibility on regional levels to ensure that organizations on regional levels can meaningfully participate in their regional forums. We also need to advocate for better quality of accessibility, because sometimes accessibility is understood as just as something that they provide and that's enough. Unfortunately, I have to say the quality during the forum, of course, it was the first time, so perhaps there were some issues with the quality. So we really have to advocate for quality accessibility and to build an inclusive and effective path for engagement in a high-level political forum. We need to ensure accessibility and participation in regional forums as well. Moreover, I think we should build a better link between organizations on regional level and global level, because our example shows that organizations on global level really supported us and helped us during our advocacy. So I think those links are necessary to share with good practices and to share with advice. We did receive a lot of help from International Disability Alliance, which helped us a lot. And lastly, I think different regions, my region is Europe, but I would like to know how is accessibility ensured or not ensured in different regions. I would like to share with my experience and get some advice from different regions or help them when advocating for more inclusive and effective participation of civil society. So this was my presentation today. If anyone has any questions, do not hesitate contacting me directly or post your questions to the chat. I'm very happy to answer, and thank you so much.
Thank you, Martina. Thank you very much. I will now invite our next speaker while I'm solving a little issue that I have here with my camera. Thank you, Martina, for your great contribution around what had happened at the European level. Indeed, accessibility, it's still a pending issue for many of us, but it is good to know how you solve it in a practical way, and in a way how you forced organizers of events to provide accessibility as a precondition for inclusion. Let me now invite our next speaker. She comes from the Pacific Disability Forum, Sainimili Towake. She has a lot of experience in working in the field of climate action and OPD engagement, Organization of Persons with Disabilities, meaningful participation. And so she will present on her work at the regional level, with particular focus on DRR and climate action. Seminili, welcome, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Jos, and thank you so much. And good evening, no, good morning from the Pacific. It's just a little bit after 12 a.m. Saturday morning. So for my presentation today, I'll be talking about the work that we do with PDF at PDF with regards to our engagement with our organizations of persons with disabilities in the 22-23 countries across the Pacific. So first, the Pacific Disability Forum, it's the only regional organization of persons with disabilities in the Pacific, and PDF has approximately about 70 members, organizations, and there's about 23 national organizations of persons with disabilities that are members to PDF. We have a secretariat in Suva, Fiji, and there's approximately about 20 of us. And in the secretariat, we have a unit that looks after humanitarian emergencies and response, and we call ourselves the Preparedness and Emergency and Response Unit. So the work that we do in the unit consists of mostly humanitarian projects and activities. We have 4 big activities or big projects running within this unit, and we have climate change, we have disaster risk reduction, we have COVID-19, and we also have WASH. With all these projects that we are running, we are working in close collaboration with our organizations of persons with disabilities in the Pacific. For the work in DRR, disaster risk reduction, we are focusing in 8 countries. This is working with national organizations of persons with disabilities in 8 countries. In the work of COVID, we are working with 10 countries. Again, with the OPDs, and with climate change, 3 countries, and then for WASH program, we are solely working with our organization in 1 country. And these projects are funded by the Australian government through the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, the New Zealand government through the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade, WHO. We also have technical support, and we have technical stakeholders like CBM, Australia Pacific Climate Partnership, and other stakeholders that support us with our work. But I guess what I'll talk about briefly today, this morning, is about how we engage with our DPOs. We don't have the luxury here in the Pacific as what other regions may have. It is because we are scattered across, a big ocean, a big Pacific Ocean, and with our islands and with our small atolls, whilst our ocean is beautiful, it comes with a lot of vulnerabilities. And here we are having close collaboration with our organizations of persons with disabilities on implementing these projects. And we are very thankful to our donors and our partners that are providing us with our support. So at the Secretariat at PDF, we, apart from the administration staff, all the staff, including us in the humanitarian emergency unit and emergency and response unit, we have office buddies. We call ourselves office buddies. We have office buddies, meaning that each office buddy has a country, has a national DPO that they have to provide technical support and advice to. So they may have one person, one staff may have one or either two countries, two DPO, two OPDs to support. And the support comes with also communication with them at a regular basis, providing technical advice in the area of as simple as administration and finance, implementing of programs and activities, having negotiation with stakeholders in country, having a dialogue with the media or high-level dialogue in country. So that various support we provide to our organizations in country, our national organizations of persons with disabilities. And with all these major projects that we run with these countries, with these organizations, they establish what we call resource teams. And in every project, there is a resource team. There's a resource team on climate change, there is a resource team on DRR, on COVID, on WASH, and so on. So we have resource teams, and these consist of persons with disabilities themselves who come in as volunteers. And for us at the office, at the Secretariat, at the Pacific Disability Forum, we also provide training and technical support to the volunteers. In addition to the project staff and the office staff and also their governing body. So we provide that technical advice, training, learning, sharing of information with these agencies, with the organizations. And in return, they're also providing us with information of what is going on in country within their own space, what they are doing, how they're implementing their projects, how they're engaging with their organizations in country, how they're talking to their government. So these are the things that's going on within the Pacific Disability Forum Secretariat, and particularly with our unit, and in with regards to communication and working with our organizations of persons with disabilities on the ground. So with that, we found with a resource team, we are providing that space. We are providing that space to nurture them, to build their confidence, to empower them, and to provide them with the skills so that they'll be able to go out. And they are doing very well. For the Pacific, we are so much, our culture is part of us. Our belief and our religious belief is very much, it's very close to us. And sometimes this also hinders the participation of persons with disabilities and also their organization. For example, if we are trying to negotiate and in the negotiation table with the partners on the ground, with our organizations of persons with disabilities on the ground, we have mostly men who come around the table, or otherwise people who are very, who are in those powerful positions. And here we are, and how we are perceived by them. So we try to break the barrier. So for us, we always, support our resource team in providing them the best information that they could use to empower themselves, and also to use when negotiating, when in negotiation with their partners or with the people, with their governments, for example, with the development agencies and other key stakeholders on the ground. We have a lot of, our organizations have a lot of partners at regional level. At the Pacific region, we have regional organizations. We're also in partnership with regional intergovernmental organizations here in the Pacific, regional civil society organizations, faith-based groups, traditional groups, the media, and also at national level. We have climate partners, the DPO, the OPDs have climate partners, also the faith-based groups, the Red Cross, other civil society organizations, the relevant ministries on which, that is aligned to the activities that they're implementing on their own. So we have vast of, partners. But for us, at Pacific Disability Forum, we nurture our organizations of persons with disabilities. We try and provide the maximum support to allow them to engage at that level, at either the community level or at the national level, so that they will be able to mainstream issues of persons with disabilities effectively. And we found changes. We found that even the confidence, building their own confidence, how they're able to work with their relevant ministries. For example, in COVID, with our COVID program, how they're working with the ministries of health, the ministries of internal affairs on producing risk communication, advocacy materials, in the area of climate change, how they're working with the climate unit in government. So these are some of the things that they are doing on the ground. And for us, it's a big impact on the work that we do and also the work that they do. And it's also from the partners or whoever they're engaging with, it allows them to see or to mainstream or to allow, to have open doors for us to come in and be at that negotiation table, through our organizations on the ground. And we have challenges as well. Some of the ministries, it's very hard to go through, the government ministries. It was very a challenge for us with some countries in trying to get through the ministries of health, for example, trying to work with them in order to provide risk communication materials on COVID-19. And also for other areas like climate change and DRR, sometimes the challenge we have because the network, the weather here, we're very much impacted with climate, the Pacific, and sometimes the network is not very well. It can be perfect here in Fiji, but if we are trying to communicate with our people in Kiribati, in Tuvalu, in Nauru, sometimes it just doesn't work. And because Fiji now is in its almost 3 months lockdown, not actually lockdown, working from home. We have borders, we have lockdown in some areas. So for 3 months, we've been working from home. And from last year, there has been some flights disruption. Our borders have been closed at some point or partially closed, and we are not allowed to travel, and we were not able to go directly, have that physical contact with our people, our persons with disabilities on the ground and their organization, to have the close contact, have that physical communication, trying to, we find it much more easier that way rather than communicating via Zoom or other platform, which, can be very economical, but it's not very efficient and effective when the Pacific is faced with a lot of disasters, the weather, and all this. It's hindering our participation and also our communication, with each other. And that is one of the greatest impact that we are, the challenge that we are going through at the moment. For us, engagement is very important. And we have our own Pacific way of engagement, and we use that a lot. Sometimes when we write letters to government ministries or to any partners, and sometimes it just doesn't work. So we take our culture, for example, or how we do things in our own cultural way, because the countries are so little or so small that people almost know each other. Somebody is a cousin to somebody else, and that somebody else is related to somebody in government. So we use those mechanisms, those traditional mechanisms or traditional practices in order to get our issues across. And also at the same time, for us, we learned that for us to effectively engage and to effectively communicate, as I've said, we have to first create a safe space for our persons with disabilities. We have to empower them. We have to provide them with information. We have to provide them with the tools. We have to, there's a lot of encouragement going on at that level to allow them to effectively engage with their partners. And we also believe, for us, we look to the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. We look to the Sustainable Development Goals. We look to some regional framework that we have here in the Pacific to guide us as well. And at the same time, we don't put our standard down. We talk about the CRPD and we say, that's it. Our negotiation has to be at that level. So we are not putting our guard down. For example, just
Sainamili, sorry to interrupt. Can I kindly ask you to close your presentation maybe in the next 2 or 3 minutes, so we give the floor to our next speaker and we have sufficient time for question and answers. Thank you.
Thank you. I was just wanting to talk about we had the Pacific Resilience Meeting, which just ended yesterday, and Pacific Disability Forum was in full force in engagement. We were part of the outcome statement group that provided outcomes, and we had presenters who presented in some sessions, and we had persons with disabilities supporting in repertory in some of the sessions. So this is a big regional meeting, which has, was held here in the Pacific with over 2,000 people zooming in from everywhere in the Pacific. So for us, we had to mobilize our people, and we have, in order for them to engage effectively, whether it, at any level. So thank you for listening, and yes, I hope to receive any question. I hope to answer any question, should you have any. Thank you.
Thank you, Sainamili. Thank you so much for your presentation, for bringing the perspective of the Pacific region, but at the same time, for sharing with us practical ways in which you have ensured that the CRPD is at the top of and becomes a core element in any negotiation, even when it comes to the implementation of the SDGs. So now, let me invite our last speaker before we open for question. Again, please, if you have any question, feel free to just write them down in the chat box and we will answer them. Let me introduce the next panelist. Her name is Paula Hearn. She is the Monitoring, Evaluation, Accountability, and Learning Officer with the International Disability Alliance. And looking into the future, trying to understand what else can we do, I would say that one of the most important component of that exercise is to actually get to know better who we are, what we do, what we want to achieve. In the end, getting to know more about our organization of persons with disabilities and persons with disabilities in general. So we have asked Paula to present on a very innovative tool, not only because the methodology that she will speak about is innovative, but also because from a technological point of view, the tool that she's going to present on is accessible for many people with disabilities. For sure, it can be always improved. But we have asked Paula to present on a global survey that the International Disability Alliance is carrying out. So Paula, welcome. Thanks for joining, and the floor is yours. If you are speaking, Paula, we cannot hear you, and I will ask some of my colleagues from the technical team if they can help us. Elena or Aaron? Okay, so I see that Paula has left. Maybe she will be
Hello,
joining shortly.
can you hear me?
Yes,
It's Yelena. Do you need me?
we were just checking about Paula's microphone, but we see that she has left. So, and now I think we have Paula. Paula, can you hear us?
Can you hear me now?
We can, thank you, and please go ahead.
Apologies. Zoom doesn't like me on a Friday morning. So good morning from near Toronto, Canada. Thank you for having me here to share with you about an exciting survey that I hope is supportive and helpful to many people. So the International Disability Alliance is an alliance of 14 global and regional networks of organizations of persons with disabilities. Together, we promote the inclusion of persons with disabilities across global efforts to advance human rights and sustainable development. So from the previous speakers, we just heard some incredible examples of how OPDs are participating and engaging with their governments, with regional mechanisms, and to ensure that there's continued progress in the way we participate. It is important for the future that we are considering how we monitor and track that progress. What is participation looking like 5 years from now, 3 years from now? Is it improving? Is it changing? Is it getting better? Is it getting worse? So for this, IDA has developed the global survey on OPD participation in policies and programs. This is a tool to collect data and capture the perceptions of organizations, persons with disabilities, of their participation with governments and international partners. So with the United Nations or with international cooperation organizations. A regular monitoring tool that we can use this for is for tracking the Nothing About Us motto. Also to track progress on Article 4.3 and 32 of the CRPD. This survey will also generate more robust evidence on what works and what are the gaps that remain in meaningful participation, and to analyze the different dimensions of meaningful participation. So what I mean by meaningful participation is who is being included, when and on which levels are OPDs being consulted on, and on what issues. Are underrepresented groups, for example, being invited to the table and fully participating? This is where we look at meaningful participation. It's one to be invited, but it's another thing to be consulted, listened to, and taken in consideration. So in December 2020, IDA launched the first report of the global survey. It is available on our website. However, I'll share a few points right now that came from that first survey. And then I will let you know about the second survey that has just been launched. So the report provides us with findings and recommendations. So some of the findings were from the 573 OPDs that responded, we found that participation of persons with disabilities through representative organizations is actually increasing overall. So that's good. However, participation remains insufficient with regards to the standards set out by Article 4.3 of the Convention. There are still significant barriers to participation in decision-making, and preconditions are not being met. So that means that there's a lack of accessibility, a lack of reasonable accommodation, poor attitudes, or a lack of knowledge. Participation of persons with disabilities is not equal across the diverse constituencies of the disability rights movement. So not everyone is being consulted. And a majority of OPDs who do engage with the UN report that their experience is positive. So 54% consider it good or very good. And with governments, involvement remains insufficient still. Overall, 42% of OPDs consider that their experience of engagement with government is poor or very poor. Some of the areas of engagement or participation remain at the implementation stage. So OPDs are being invited to implement policies or programs, but not always invited to the planning stage or the development stage, which we know is important for inclusion. There are a few recommendations that came out. Just for example, OPDs recommend to governments to focus on the provision of financial support to OPDs, to include all groups of persons with disabilities, and to consider their views in meaningful roles. For the UN, they ask the UN to act as allies to OPDs to help facilitate the engagement with governments, and to funding agencies. They recommend to support OPD organizational and tactical development. Also to fund projects that are not discriminatory towards persons with disabilities. So that was just a flavor of some of the pieces that were in the first report. And because this tool is an ongoing survey that we want to use to track participation over time, IDA has now launched the second global survey on OPD participation. The survey is now open and available in International Sign in 6 languages. As I speak, the link to the survey will be pasted in the chat box of this webinar, or you can always access it through the IDA website. We welcome participation of disability activists from OPDs from around the world. We want to hear from OPDs active at the local, national, regional, and global level. The survey can be filled by volunteers, staff, board members, and there can be more than one response per OPD. So you can have multiple people from your organization take the survey. So to ensure that more persons with disabilities can participate in the survey, IDA developed a new accessible survey platform, which is called iData. And it was tested with persons with disabilities. And the survey is hosted on iData. So this platform adapts to the users through diverse sets of accessibility features. It helps to reduce that survey fatigue, which we all have these days. And it also is easier to connect in lower internet connections, just for example. So please share the survey widely within your networks. Take the survey. The more data we collect, the more evidence we will have on OPD participation, which we can use to advocate for a future where OPDs are able to meaningfully participate. Thank you very much for having me today, and back to you, Jose.
Thank you, Paula. Thank you for your presentation. Thank you for sharing this great tool that people with disabilities and all those other people involved in the disability rights movement can join and contribute. I think this is a great channel to actually raise our voice and make ourselves heard. So We have heard from a great number of panelists from different perspectives. Now we would like to give the floor to participants to ask questions and to have an interactive dialogue with these great speakers. So for that, I will ask either Erin or Bethany to help me a little bit with the chat box to see if we have questions so far. Otherwise, I do have some other questions that we have received in advance of the webinar to the panelists. And maybe if Bethany or Erin can tell me if we have any questions on the chat box. If not, I can start with the list I have here. Erin or Bethany?
Thanks very much, Jose. We have a first question that's to Martina. That question is, what has been the greatest benefit of participating in the regional forums?
Should I take the question now?
Yes, please, go ahead.
Okay, thanks, Bethany, for the question. I would say there is a number of benefits participating in regional forums, starting with the achievements that we have. You know, we increased the awareness of the United Nations European Economic Commission for Europe of the need to have accessibility and need to have persons with disabilities meaningfully included. We increased their awareness of the fact that accessibility is not just international sign provision, it's much more. And next years we will be building on our achievements. So that's very important. Another benefit is making sure that within the input from civil society, persons with disabilities have a say and they have their perspectives included in civil society statement, which is being delivered during the forum. Also, as a result, that is an input in the outcome document of the regional forum. So we do then have references included in the report, which feeds to high-level political forum. So we have a number of benefits, and if I could encourage other regions, organizations in different regions to participate, I will definitely do that. And also I have to mention one more thing. Our example now can serve as a good practice example for other forums and other events at the UN, which are not always accessible for persons with disabilities. And that's one of the greatest benefits, that now we have a good practice example of advocating for accessibility, achieving it, and we can use it, this example, in the future.
Thank you, Martina. Bethany, do we have more questions from the chat box?
Yes, we do. Thank you. We have a question about social protection. The question comes from Eric Nugandi. In light of social protection, especially in the region, what can you say about insurance agencies that raise premiums when they sort by persons with disabilities? That isn't directed to anyone in particular, from what I can see. Right. So if there's so Jose.
Thank you. Yeah, and maybe the question that I don't know if any of the speakers would like to address the question. Maybe the question is a little bit out of the scope of the webinar, but let's see if any of the speakers, maybe Mohammed, you have something to say about it. Otherwise, we take note of the question and maybe we can try to answer it offline. Does any of the speakers would like to answer the question?
I will.
Go ahead.
Great. We have two volunteers here. So I heard Saini Mili, you wanted to answer? Was it you? Okay,
Yes,
so go ahead, please, and then we will hear from Mohammed. And thank you.
Thank you, thank you. I'll try and attempt to answer that question. The challenge we have here in the Pacific, and particularly here in Fiji, where when we talk about insurance, when we have insurance, and for people with disabilities, you know, if you acquire disability at the time of your employment, you may have. You can be compensated, or there's insurance cover. But if you are born with your disability, or it's not within the time you've been employed, then it's not covered. So for me, for example, being partially sighted, I was born with that, even though if I have to go and get cover for a pair of new glasses or for surgery, I am not covered. According to the policy, to the insurance here, which is very discriminatory when we look at it. And for social protection for persons with disabilities, only a few countries in the Pacific governments are providing social protection for persons with disabilities. We have approximately about five countries, sorry. And these countries, now I'm degrading, sort of diversing, not from insurance, but on the whole issue of social protection. And sometimes some of the protection that's given, you have to be unemployed, then social protection will be given by government. If you're employed, then social protection will not be given. The reality here in the Pacific is because of inaccessibility to education service, education facilities, and the lack of reasonable accommodation and all that, that prevents the people with disabilities partaking effectively in the area of education. So the jobs available here in the Pacific for persons with disabilities, it's very minimum, like for them to acquire a white-collar job, so to speak. So we talk about little jobs, but then if they take that little jobs with very little wage, they still can't get social protection or the disability cost to compensate for that. So that's one of the challenges that we are facing in the Pacific. Thank you.
Thank you. Mohammed?
Yes, sir. Well, this is a very sensitive topic to address. However, before I answer the question, one should recognize the progress that's been done on the level of realizing that persons with disabilities must be systematically included in the mainstream program of social protection. And ILO, the business model promoted by ILO today in partnership with other organizations like UNICEF, and have really enhanced this kind of focus on the inclusivity of social protection programs. However, we have to understand that social protection or the regulations of social protection are influenced by the context of countries. And if I would like to refer to developing countries, I have to note that social protection is still, to a great extent, under the influence of the prevailing control of institutions that promote the segregation of persons with disabilities, or segregating institutions for persons with disabilities. They control that to make sure that the social protection subsidies or programs must somehow be channeled through their programs to a certain extent. This is why our partnership together, especially between Global North and Global South, from Global South countries, people there can learn from the experience of developed countries in the Global North to fight this prevailing control of institutions, segregating institutions of persons with disabilities. The other thing is we need to work with our own constituency in our countries and the local level to make sure that they understand the risk or the critical role that these institutions are playing, and how much they can control the government's understanding and interaction with issues of persons with disabilities. So if I want to frame my answer in the in what we are discussing today about partnership, it's very important that we work together to raise our constituents' awareness to change this situation. However, we have to recognize the progress that's been happening. Thank you.
Right, thank you, Mohammed. Bethany, do we have other questions?
Yes, we have a question from Bhargavi Davar from TCI. She writes, TCI is the largest membership-based global organization of persons with psychosocial disabilities. What is the level of engagement of our constituency in the 2030 agenda? What can we do to support and engage? This engagement will help to forward the aspect of deinstitutionalization and our inclusion in development. And that is
Thank you,
the
Bhargavi.
question.
Great question.
Great question.
And I think many of our speakers would like to say something, I'm sure, about it. So why don't we just do a round? Can I start with you, Mohammed?
Yes, of course. Thank you. Thank you, Bhargavi, for this excellent question. Let me speak on the involvement of persons with psychosocial disabilities in the delegation of the Stakeholder Group of Persons with Disabilities to HLPF in New York. We have done a great deal to make sure that persons with psychosocial disabilities are involved. Our message and our engagement takes into consideration all types of disabilities, especially those who are underrepresented represented among persons with disabilities, mainly persons with social disabilities and persons with intellectual and developmental disabilities. And we have great examples of engaging them in previous years when HLPF was still held in person, and we flew in lots of them to participate. However, I would like to emphasize that there is a need to make sure that we are engaging persons with psychosocial disabilities on the ground when we are trying to review the work of governments on the level of implementation of the SDGs and the extent of their inclusivity towards issues of persons with disabilities. And we have to work with civil society organizations that are also involved in this process to make sure that we don't only limit the engagement of persons with psychosocial disability to the disability movement, but also to make it more visible, more recognized, more included within the work of mainstream civil society.
Thank you. Thank you, Mohammed. Martina, I know that you mainly work with deaf people, but maybe in your experience at the regional level, you have managed to interact with people with psychosocial disability. Do you have any comments to share with our audience?
We did have some interest, I think, from organizations from the European level to engage with us. And I think we will definitely strive. I think that's a lesson for the future. We will be perhaps reaching out more and more effectively next year to ensure that all kind of organizations are more involved in our work. But this is something we struggle with because we try to disseminate the information and invite different kind of organizations, but we don't receive so much answers. So perhaps we'll try new strategies next year to see how we can better engage with all and different organizations on the European level. And of course, if anyone has any suggestions or advice how to reach out and promote the participation among different organizations, of course, it's welcome to reach out to me.
Thank you, Martina. Just checking, Dominic, as we agreed, if you would like to take the floor, you just put your thumbs up, and I'll make sure to give you the floor. Otherwise, let me invite Sanimili to see if she would like to share any thought about the question raised by our dearest colleague Bhargavi. Sanimili?
Yes, thank you. And hello, Bhargavi. Thank you so much for the question. For PDF, at PDF, we have, as I've alluded to in one of my presentation just recently, we have a buddy, an office buddy, an office staff who provides buddy or buddy support to organizations of persons with disabilities who are focusing their work on psychosocial disabilities, on persons with psychosocial disabilities. And for Fiji, we have a national organization, the Psychiatric Survivors Association, and they are NOPD, and with engagement with them, we also provide that support. The same support we provide to other national organizations of persons with disabilities, we also provide to Psychiatry Survivors Association of Fiji. And for them, their engagement has been really good. Them taking the lead role in providing peer-to-peer support, for example, to persons with disabilities. And now we're on lockdown. They are part of the steering committee of the disability committee that was established specifically for disaster and humanitarian response. With COVID, they were able to go out with the support of PDF and the National Organization of Persons with Disabilities, supporting them with regards to funding at some point to go out and provide peer-to-peer support for persons with psychosocial disabilities who live on the streets and bring issues of abuse that they encounter on the streets to the main organization, and they were able to talk with people who are doing the abuse, the police who are doing the abuse. So those kind of activities that they are doing, and they're really coming up on the, has been vocal to their issues to allow them to participate, and also bringing the issues to the media. So there's been some media releases with regards to them highlighting their own issues with support from the National Organization of Persons with Disabilities here in Fiji. So for them, for their engagement, our engagement with them, of course we face challenges in some of our engagement, but they are always be on the front line when it comes to persons with psychosocial disability. And when we have meetings, when we have even regional meetings, we have persons with psychosocial disabilities participating and also being part of panelists as speakers, and we have persons with intellectual disabilities sitting in, and we're providing that support in getting their support person to help them understand the context of the conversation that we're in. And last year, for example, we organized a big humanitarian meeting with different stakeholders, and for the stakeholders, it was a first-time experience for them to the humanitarian stakeholders to be inside a room with persons with psychosocial disabilities as presenters, and also participating with them, sitting with them side by side. So that was an opener for them. So this is the experience that we have in the Pacific, like we're getting them to be involved in whatever that we are doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Sanamali. Bethany, I understand that we do have a question with Dominic, and that Dominic would like to answer the question. So could you read out the question, then please, Dominic, feel free to respond to the question. Bethany?
Sí, entendí la pregunta. Sí, entendí la pregunta. La ventaja de trabajar en una organización es lo más es más, es más enriquecedor trabajar con personas con discapacidad y que aporta lo más importante, da puntos de vista, las opiniones, y eso es fundamental, trabajar con todas las capacidades diversas.
So the fundamental thing is to work with diverse organizations. Thank you. Thank you so much.
So we are slowly running out of time, and this is great because that means that you have a lot of questions and that our speakers did a great job in presenting about what they are doing. Let me just, in closing, highlight at least what I'm taking away from this webinar. I did hear loud and clear Dominique when she said that those who are we are vulnerable, and during the pandemic we were even more vulnerable, but at the same time we are resilient, and even the pandemic made us even being more resilient. Dominic also clearly said we are persons with disabilities. In her case, she's a woman with disabilities, but we have refugees with disabilities, people with living in rural areas who are persons with disabilities, and intersectionality is indeed a very much needed element to be considered for the Agenda 2030. Mohammed clearly shared with us the importance of partnership. And from the Stakeholder Group of Persons with Disabilities, we try to promote different partnerships from the disability community with international NGOs, with UN agencies, etc., and how key is to encourage OPDs to partner and other organizations to recognize OPDs as meaningful partners in the field of the Agenda 2030. Martina once again gave us clear example of how we can advocate concretely in securing accessibility and the right to access to different events. Our colleagues from the Pacific once again brought our attention to the need of investing more and more in issues related to climate change, as it does not only affect specific countries, but is indeed a global issue that must be addressed, and that there is still a lot to be done when it comes to people with disabilities and climate action. So we would like to see more OPDs participating in the upcoming UNCCC in November, and UN agencies allowing persons with disabilities and their representative organizations participating in the climate action agenda. Finally, Paula has shared, and I hope you can take it with you and use it and disseminate it, a great tool to know more about people with disabilities. If we want to improve our advocacy work, if we want to be more engaged, if we want to be meaningful participating, the first thing to do is to get more knowledge about who we are, to get more evidence, to gather more data. And the tool that Paula presented is an effort that the International Disability Alliance is doing on behalf of the 1 billion people with disabilities in getting to know more what we need and how we can engage. Ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the conclusion and to the end of this side event, HLPF. Before we close, I really want to thank our colleagues from the International Disability Alliance, Bethany, Erin, for doing a great job in ensuring that this side event was successful. Also, among many of the members of the Stakeholder Group of Persons with Disabilities, CBM Global Disability Inclusion, it's a great partner, always supporting our work, always being there to listen to what we need and doing a lot of things with us. So let me take this opportunity to thank Elizabeth Lockwood from CBM Global Disability Inclusion, Mary Keogh, and the rest of the CBM global members to be always there for the Stakeholder Group of Persons with Disabilities. Wishing you all the best. I hope you can enjoy the rest of the HLPF. Thanks to the speakers, and have a nice rest of the day. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.